In an ideal setting, I would love to see President Biden sort of be statesmanlike and saying we're going to restart this.
I would like to see Huawei's operating system as a competitor to Android and Apple's iOS system.
I think China has a very good story, and it should live on its story and just continue to do well. Success is the greatest attractor.
Gentlemen, it's great to have you back on China Chat, and this time to talk about China's 14th five-year plan. And on this topic, we could probably talk for days on end. So I have prepared 3 objects as hints to the themes of our discussion. Michael, would you like to open the first box?
Certainly.
You can hand it over.
I'd
Check
be
it out.
happy to.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. Panda, silver coin, and...
So I think that's economics.
And my question is, where do you foresee China's economy in 5 years?
Well, definitely stronger. China has a very, very developed planning process. Everything is vetted. An idea comes out from the ministry or the government. They take it all the way down. They first make sure it fits in with the long-range plans, 5 and 15 and 50. And then it goes all the way down to the bottom, to the work units. You're a member of a work unit.
Certainly China in 2020 had positive growth. GDP, I think, around 2.3%. That was largely because of the impact of the pandemic. Going into this year and future years under the 14th five-year plan, certainly I think we will see steady growth. The anticipation is to start in the area of 6% annual growth in GDP.
Yeah, but isn't it mostly at 8?
I do think that 6% perhaps is a bit of a cautious figure. I think that probably that area of 6 to 7% will be fairly predictable over the course of the 5 years.
I think there are two important things going forward. One is the Chinese government in 2020 was much more cautious about both fiscal and monetary stimulus than anywhere else in the world. So I'm not expecting China to face the kind of financial instability and crisis that we're likely to see in the rest of the world. The second thing that's really important in the 5-year plan is China's at a point of inflection. 10 years ago was clearly an investment-driven system, investment in factories, investment in infrastructure. Now China's infrastructure is built out. I think China has to transform to have indigenous innovation, and there's a lot of emphasis in the 14th five-year plan on building up technological capabilities. The other thing is it has to spread that innovation around the country. They use a term in the government work report, the term vitality. It has to be a vitality and dynamism spread around the country.
Michael, care to elaborate on innovation-driven development?
Sure. We see that the government is indicated support growth in research and development funding.
Over 7%.
This is actually a very, very significant component of the economic side of the 5-year plan. Funding for research and development is not specifically focused on any particular area. For example, it's not just for digital technology.
But they've specifically put aside funds for chip development. In essence, tried to shore up their own internal supply chains.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
That's a key component.
One of the things I notice living in China is how much competition there is in many sectors. In the U.S., we don't see that level of competition. For instance, in e-commerce, you have a lot of companies competing, where in the United States it's been heavily monopolized. The other thing is the National Security Strategy document of the United States emphasizes very much 2 things. One is stopping China from getting new technology, and the other is investing in future technological development in the United States. I'm very doubtful that the U.S. government is competent to do the latter, but I'm hoping the Chinese government is competent to carry out its own strategy. But the only way to do that is to spread the funds around and be sure that the technology goes into something that's productive. And now China is in the opportunity to use the new technologies for productivity. Well, a lot of the technology increases the efficiency, so its factories can become more efficient and wages go up because of that. The other is China has a lot of hinterland that needs to be developed. And a lot of these new technologies, the 5G, the e-commerce, they help people develop in those areas too.
Well, I want to get back to something Einar said. Part of the research and development budget is targeted because it is very important that China as a nation be self-sufficient in the semiconductor area, artificial intelligence, quantum computing. That doesn't mean all of the research and development money is going to those particular areas. I think we could look at the funding that's going toward R&D as trying to accomplish two broad objectives. One is, as Einar suggested, to make sure that China is self-sufficient, that there are not areas where foreign countries can interfere with the supply chain for various domestic Chinese industries. The second objective is to provide the education and also the innovation to push the country forward and keep it growing as it has been in recent years.
The way it was expressed, you said China is shoring up and self-protectionism. But the fact is, it didn't occur until these last 4 years when Donald Trump came in and said, look, I'm going to cut off your supplies. So China is reacting, all right, to containment strategy that's being pushed by another country. We have Apple, $10 billion a year in terms of research and development, and then Huawei with $15 billion. Huawei put $15 billion a year into their research and development, and what did they get in return? You're cheating. You're taking our stuff. We're going to ban you. This is the real consequences. There's a basic hypocrisy. We're on top, and we want to stay there.
Well, I agree with that.
We say a lot of stuff, but we don't actually follow through.
China is definitely being pushed into developing its own technology because of U.S. policy, which started in the Obama administration, by the way, and will continue, according to the National Security Strategy document published last week. That would be true whatever the international situation. China is too big to be a follower country in terms of technology or to depend on international trade for its growth. It has to grow internally through its own technology.
I don't think you should be doing follow-on technology, especially in China. You should be looking at leapfrogging. China has the ability, which is going to be very much in quantum computing. Why would you concentrate on silicon right now, when in fact the next generation is going to be in a quantum computing state, which is probably going to be very, very different structure and organization. But the question still remains, all right, will the US and Europe let it happen? Because every time China does indigenous innovation, whether it's 5G or a lot of kind of base stuff, all of a sudden, you know, it's a threat. And we have to contain it.
I don't see that as a problem. The world is a very big place. There is a concern that the countries in the West, the United States in particular, will look at that and say, oh, China is starting a technology race. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say, I think it would be great if the nations of the world would engage in a technology race.
There's a very important phrase in the government work report, which is used in China a lot, is China's peaceful rise. It's one of the things that made China able to rise over the last 40 years is it has not been involved in any stupid war, as opposed to the United States that has been involved in stupid wars over most of my lifetime.
Endless wars.
And it never stops. And I think it's important to recognize that most of this research goes into peaceful development. So I think continuing the peaceful rise is really, really crucial for China going forward. You're going to see a lot of technology that the United States and other countries want to stop China from getting. I don't think that's going to work. Hard to stop the spread of technology. I think further emphasis on more competition in the world is a good thing. I would like to see Huawei's operating system as a competitor to Android and Apple's iOS system. The more competition, the better.
So China is pursuing high-quality development. I'd like to know, what exactly does it entail?
High-quality development is really that ability to move past the middle income trap.
I think the government should enforce antitrust law in particular.
So competition
and the government should not create a system where it allows a few Wall Street banks to dominate the country, which is exactly what we did over the last 30 years.
I think that the two places that we will see involvement of China's central government to make the market more competitive are, one, making these large companies more responsive to the market. The other area is in modernizing many of the state-owned enterprises.
I just want to add a comment here. The three of us come from very different perspectives and backgrounds. Let's agree on that. But So far, all I've heard is that all three of us agree that the free market does not work unless it's regulated.
One of the big things been mentioned over the last year is financial opening up to foreign competition.
Yeah,
but I do think China should be very, very cautious about that.
It's important to regulate the financial services system. And essentially where we need to go is we need to expose the decision of banks or other lenders when they make a loan. We need to expose that more to market forces. One way that this can be addressed is through an expansion of corporate bonds, having a more specialized debt market.
I'm going to disagree with both of you in the sense that the next upcoming revolution is the digital yuan. Every yuan that is digital will be traceable. You know exactly where it went, when it went for, and who, and timing. So this is going to change everything.
You're absolutely right. Information transparency are the regulator's best friends.
Also, there are concerns of privacy.
So China has probably put in the most effective privacy. They're in essence saying they will have the information at the top level, all right, from the Bank of China. They'll have all the transactional information. But if a bank or a company underneath that is trying to gather and use that information, they have to get personal permission from those involved. I think it'd be very interesting to see how that is.
I think
in
that's
5
a great
years.
idea.
So what do you think will be the main challenges for the next 5 years? Financial
Well,
markets
obviously,
for one.
pollution is going to continue to be a big challenge. You've got to be sure that the transition toward a less carbon-intensive system is a just transition. That somehow that the working people are not the ones who suffer in that transition. You have to be careful about that. I think the question of will China be able to create indigenous technology, that's going to be answered in the next 10 years.
One of my biggest concerns would be the risk associated with corporate debt. Another financial risk that we haven't talked about is that of the real estate market. And it really is tied in to some of these other issues of stimulus and corporate debt, because one of the reasons that there are these escalations in prices is that companies are investing in real estate. When they get money, they don't know what to do with it in terms of new innovative products. Then what do you do to make sure that it's safe? You put it in real estate, just like everybody else. And that drives up the prices in those markets.
I think China has internal challenges. I think it can deal with most of those. But on a global basis, climate change, that's not something China can do alone. Also, in terms of politics, we are arriving at a crisis point. The question is, does it escalate? You have one side, an existing power, that believes, it's very ideological, believes in American exceptionalism, that there's only one way that the whole world should be ruled, economically and politically. And if you don't have that way, you're therefore an enemy. What do all of the countries that America hates have in common? They don't adopt our system.
Probably to a surprise. I'm going to agree with Einar.
Wait a second. Write down the time and date.
I think everybody just needs to calm down. Stop attacking each other all the time.
America's looking for another adversary, and they're turning to China, but China is not an aggressive expansionist power. So what is the United States doing? It's looking at pieces of China itself and trying to intervene or interfere. There are actually discussions and votes in the U.S. Congress about the status of Hong Kong. There's constant discussion of various other internal areas in China, such as Xinjiang and Tibet. In a sense, you could say when the U.S. doesn't have an expansionist adversary to work against, it creates one.
I want to go back to your press things. I've noticed a lot of correspondents, when they come here, they already have in their mind that...
I was sympathetic, at the beginning of this argument. Well, in the United States, we have press that will look into every dark corner and expose everything.
Not so much anymore.
But no, and actually, there's tremendous political bias in the press. Mm-hmm. So that if I'm on this side, I only look at the dark corners on that side, and to my mind, they've lost all credibility once they've done that.
We're all in agreement.
Both of you mentioned about the interferences coming from the United States. China keeps saying, stop interfering in our internal affairs. And we also have China-US communique, but obviously it's being ignored. So what's your opinion on improving the electoral system of Hong Kong and the principle of patriots administering Hong Kong?
In the end of the day, a place like Hong Kong, it has to reconcile itself to the fact that it is part of China. China has the duty to maintain a civil society. And if that means not having separatists out there actively saying that you should have the right to vote on whether you want to be part of China or not, is going to be the way it is. Having those riots, people being killed on the streets, police officers being knifed in the neck, old men being stoned to death, that's not nice. And the first duty of a civil government is to provide law and order.
I would argue that although Hong Kong has often been seen as the gateway to China, that since the handover, it has simply tried to maintain that status and not really integrate with the economy. Had there been more economic integration from the Hong Kong side, more interest in that, I think that that they would be probably farther along in terms of integration as a society.
Let's go back to the premise here. There is no ambiguity. The NPC is, on all things constitutional, the final word, period. So when there are issues, it is going to be handled there.
How about Xinjiang, and has any one of you been there yet?
A number of times.
How was it?
It's been as safe as any place in China. This idea that some place is reserved only for people of a certain ethnicity doesn't work. China is a highly mobile society, and it had to be in order to build the cities that we are in. Everything and all the infrastructure that you've talked about. This was not done by the local guy, down the street. Hundreds of thousands of people would have come in to make these bridges, railways, etc. One thing that seems very, very apparent, in 5 years from now, they want to have a central language so that people can understand each other. Also, it's necessary so that people are mobile. If you only speak Cantonese, guess what? You can go to Guangdong, or you can go to Hong Kong, and nowhere else. You're physically, geographically limited by your language. The same in Xinjiang, in Tibet, okay? These are all areas where if you don't do it, you lessen your mobility. And that's one of the problems with Hong Kong. I mean, many of these students could go to the mainland, but they don't have the language. So they're stuck there. And they're literally being artificially forced by the market because there's so many of them and only so many jobs. So where is that mobility there? So I think China is saying, look, the country that prepares itself for the next economy is going to win the economic situation. And part of that is having a unified sense of being and unified languages and then the skills that can propel you and give you opportunities.
I think in terms of U.S. commentary on China, one China, issues of Taiwan, Hong Kong, Xinjiang, Tibet. One thing that needs to be pointed out is actually the United States has a very, very clear position on separatism, which it achieved in 1865. And that is, the United States is opposed to secession. The United States is opposed to
But it's different when it's a different country.
That's correct.
You have small hypocrisies, large hypocrisies, but when you start having them be so transparently hypocritical, it starts to undermine. I think that's really what is undermining our soft power abroad in Europe and other places, because they said, well, we just don't trust you because it's one rule for the U.S. and another rule for somebody else.
So gentlemen, let's move on. David, would you like to open the second box?
Sure. Oh, it's a heavy one.
Check it out.
It's a...
Yeah, it's a smart speaker.
Smart
For
speaker.
your home. Yes.
It's an intelligent speaker.
It's a Xiaomi. It's not one of the Amazon ones, then. It's probably not spying on.
So, question, how do you think the 14th five-year plan will help the Chinese people live a better life?
I think it's going to push technology. One thing that really impresses me is that you can get 4G, maybe even now 5G, almost anywhere in China, which is not true in most countries. I think it's going to lead to better control of pollution. I think that will improve people's lives every day. I think it will probably increase wages of workers, and that's a very important thing also.
I would like to think about the people living outside the major cities. Technology is a big driver. It can bring many of the attractions of the city or many of the opportunities of the city to different parts of the country.
And a follow-up one for Ina. So what will happen to China's rural areas in another 5 years?
Well, you're going to continue to see larger farms that are more efficient, the use of more drones and robotics in terms of agriculture. You'll see people moving towards smaller towns, enjoying, I think, a better lifestyle, and especially in terms of habitation, access to services and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
One thing we've seen is that healthcare and education in small cities and rural areas is not up to the standards of the big cities. And I think it's really important to create a highly capable workforce, that healthcare and education standards be raised throughout rural areas.
And in terms of the environment and climate, would you call the 14th Five-Year Plan also a decarbonization blueprint?
It's certainly moving in that direction. I mean, we should not underestimate the amount of challenge that will be involved in moving toward a carbon neutral economy. But it's certainly a step in that direction. And the big step is moving away from coal, but you're going to have to find jobs for all those people who are no longer working in coal. And you're going to have to find ways for people to heat their homes. It's going to be a very challenging process.
And Michael, China aims to ensure its carbon emissions peak by 2030 and then achieve carbon neutrality by 2060. Do you think the 14th Five-Year Plan is practical enough to move toward these goals?
Yes, I think so. The country first, recognizes that carbon emissions will continue to increase, although the rate at which they increase will perhaps decrease, and certainly they're slowing the growth of the problem. And then after it reaches a maximum, it's going to go down and attain carbon neutrality in around 2060. So it's a long-term plan. It's something that is going to be subject to further adjustment. It's not all the decisions don't have to be made this year or in this 14th five-year plan. But I think that the current arc of progress is correct, and I think it certainly is sufficient for where the country wants to go.
So, I agree. Right now, what China has done is taking a very pragmatic approach. It's coming out of this post-pandemic uncertainties globally, challenges locally, where they need a little bit more wiggle room. As always, China has a tendency to underpromise and overperform. So they haven't missed any of their goals. It's just like the 6% you were talking about. Everyone else says it's 8 to 9%, but they're trying to be modest, yes. Right? So it doesn't mean that China won't meet those goals.
Mm-hmm. And the last box, Ina, would you like to open it?
Sure.
So make a guess on the question.
I think it's about culture and sports and soft power.
Ping-pong diplomacy. Where do you think China-U.S. relations are going, and what would you suggest the Biden administration to do?
I think U.S.-China relations are likely to continue to be problematic for the next 10 years or so, because the United States has a belief in a world order system which was created, in which it drives, and China is a growing power. And the biggest thing we need to do is concentrate on seeing the good parts of each other and also keeping the situation calm. Don't let it get out of control. Be sure that we maintain as peaceful relations as possible.
It's clear that President Biden right now is taking a little time to think through how he wants to approach the China question. Domestically, he has a number of constraints, many of them created by his predecessor, President Trump, by alerting Americans to the competition that China represented, and actually doing so in a very harsh and acrimonious way. He changed the tone of the domestic discussion. So President Biden, even if he would like to change all of that and put all of that aside, he can't. He's somewhat constrained, and at the same time, he has to protect himself against attacks from the other political party. So, in an ideal setting, I would love to see President Biden sort of be statesmanlike and saying we're going to restart this. And I think that what he will try to do is he will emphasize a hard line with China on some technical trade issues, but try to demonstrate a broader multilateralism and work in a friendlier way with China in some other contexts.
Thank you. Aina, China's State Council and Foreign Minister Wang Yi said differences in systems should not be an excuse for antagonism or confrontation. What do you think?
There are many paths to prosperity. It's not just one road. China's had success for 40 years with the system that it's had, and I don't think you can deny that. The U.S. says it has the best system, but we have seen since 1979 the malaise of the middle class, and not only shrinking, but also their purchasing power, in essence, staying fairly flat. So from that perspective, there's got to be a realization, especially outside China, that each country has to find its own way, and it's not the responsibility of one nation to rule all.
Thank you. And gentlemen, a quick yes or no question. Would you call the 14th five-year plan a plan to overtake the United States?
No.
No. China's internal markets and its internal development are the most important thing for China.
I'll say no.
I think China has a very good story, and it should live on its story and just continue to do well. Success is the greatest attractor, and I think that's China's strong suit, and that's why I'm saying it's not trying to overtake, it's simply reacting to what they perceive are threats from others.
So what does China's 14th five-year plan mean for the rest of the world?
It's an example of a different system, a path to prosperity that other countries cannot repeat, but they can study and try to find pieces that work for their country.
And how is a greener, more innovative and safer China relevant to and better for other countries?
Well, a more innovative China provides benefits for the rest of the world. When you innovate, it creates opportunities for people around the world. They can be the follower countries. That's a good thing. And of course, being greener is better for the rest of the planet.
And the 14th five-year plan actually marks China's new journey to build a modern socialistic country. If and when China accomplishes this, what will this mean to other countries?
There's a school of strategists that believe anything that's good for one country is necessarily bad for other countries. They believe it's either a zero-sum or a negative-sum game. I think that's completely wrong. I think a prosperous China would be good for the rest of the world, a very prosperous China, because it provides markets, it provides innovation, it provides competition. It would create a better world.
Thank you, gentlemen. And before we end the show, the two deputies we talked to last time have sent us video updates. They couldn't join us today because you're in meetings, but they would like to share their 2 sessions experience. So let's check.
Thank you.
Hi guys, I'm very sorry that I cannot join you today for the discussion, even online, for the 14th five-year plan. I'm very impressed by this report. When talking about the innovation and the creativity, now Chinese government emphasize the basic research. In this report, they use a Chinese word using 10 years to sharpen a sword, to encourage all academic researchers to be more concentrated, more patient and persistent in their research. I fully agree with that. And also in the five-year plan, it mentioned we should set up an international Chinese communication platform. I think the most important we should first do is to illustrate and to unfold, to let the foreigners to know what it is about, what is a real picture of China. We should do it from many small details to unfold the picture of the real China.
Hello, Mr. David Blair, Mr. Anna Tangen, and Mr. Michael Powers. What most impressed me is that an action plan is elaborated to peak carbon emission by 2030, and a promise is made to achieve carbon neutrality by 2060. With the plan coming into effect, as the board chairman of the company I'm working for, that is Guizhou Phosphate Chemical Group, I have to be more prepared to face more merciless requirements on pollution control. And at the same time, I'm delighted to find some unexpected opportunities are approaching the company. In 5 years from now, I'm confident that China will become a better China, more eco-friendly, more digitally developed, less disparity in wealth between rural and urban communities, a more balanced development between different regions, higher level public security, a more robust and a resilient economy, more attractive business environment, and more business opportunities to global business partners.
Thank you, gentlemen, so much for joining our show. Thanks.
My
You've
pleasure.
been a wonderful host.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.